So in this video, I will be discussing the cell cycle. And so it's important to note two things. I'm mostly going to describe an overall summary of the cell cycle, but it's important to note that all cells respond to signals for division. That's first off. And so the cell cycle, there's two things that can occur. Mitosis creates clones of cells. Meiosis creates gametes, such as sperm and egg, to produce new organisms. And so when cells divide, division is important for growth, recovery, cell replacement, as well as reproduction. And so let's talk about the cycle. Let's get a diagram. Let me clear it. And so this is essentially what the cell cycle looks like. And so the bulk of activity going on in a cell is about normal activities. Most of the time the cell is not dividing. Most of time is spent in interphase. And what interphase is, the cell cycle essentially has two stages: interphase and mitosis. And so mitosis is one stage, and everything else is interphase, so 90%. And it's important to remember not all cells divide or get cloned, whatever. Not all cells divide at the same rate. For example, your skin cells divide much more rapidly than cardiac muscle cells, for example. Cardiac muscle cells, in fact, do not divide. And so let's talk a little bit about interphase. Let me clear this. So interphase is made up of G1, S, and G2. And so first let's talk about G1. So G1 is the longest stage. S is the second longest, and G2 is the third longest, and then mitosis is the shortest. But anyway, back to G1. During G1, the cell recovers from the previous division of mitosis. Notice how it's a cycle. The cell doubles the organelles to get ready for reproduction, division, I mean, and it accumulates raw materials for DNA. So, raw material for DNA, because DNA has to be replicated as well. And now, essentially, it's just growth preparing for DNA synthesis. S is the phase where DNA is replicated. Here is where some people get confused. So when we think of chromosomes, we typically think of this X shape, right? And that is a chromosome, but it's made up of two chromatids. However, if you only have one side of the X, that's also called a chromosome as well. So what happens is a chromosome is essentially defined as, if it's, you could think of it as like a whole bunch of DNA stuck together. So if it's stuck together as two pieces, that's still one chromosome. If it's one piece, it's still one chromosome. So what happens is you enter the cell cycle with one and then leave with two. But these are called chromatids. So tid. Each one of these halves, I guess. And then finally we have G2. So G2, the cell makes proteins that are necessary for division. And essentially it's just the final preparation for division. And I'll make a separate video on mitosis because that's just a lot of stuff we need to get into and it's a complicated process.